Okay, hello everyone. My name is Taisha Preston, and I am the administrative assistant here at SCMA. Welcome to today's webinar, How I Made It with Kimberly Best. This webinar is in webinar format, and you can hear and see us, but we cannot hear or see you. We welcome questions from the audience. So if you would like to ask him a question, please go ahead and put your questions in the question and answer section, and our host will do their best to get to them. This webinar is also being recorded and will be made available to all those who registered sometime this week or next week. If you have any general questions regarding the webinar, please feel free to send me a message on the chat, or you can email us at info@scmediation.org. I will now turn it over to your hosts, Richard Earhart and Jennifer Taranto.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this How I Made It series. We are so pleased to have Kim Best with us here today from Tennessee to share her journey and tell us a bit about her practice. So Kim, thank you for being here. Why don't you just start off by telling us about your mediation practice, the types of disputes you mediate, who your clients are.
Well, it's an honor to be here. And Susan, I saw you type in, and I think you recommended this for me. So thank you for that. I just want to give a little disclaimer that my cat decided to show up, and I'm wrestling for the screen with him right now. So yeah, so I've been a mediator for about seven or 8 years. I am the owner of Best Conflict Solutions. And that's a really broad question you asked me, Jennifer. What type of things I mediate? I'm thinking when people start off in mediation, a lot of times people say focus on one thing, find one thing you really like to do. And I haven't been able to find one thing that I really like to do. I'm a fan of conflict, other people's conflict, not my own.
Yeah.
And so wherever the opportunity for mediation, I just see mediation as something that has so much opportunity for people to learn, to promote peace, to help with conflict resolution. So typically I do some marriage and family divorce mediations. I do elder. I do work with Mediators Beyond Borders. I don't want to really go into a monologue on that because I think you probably have some specific questions, but yeah, here in Tennessee.
What kind of elder disputes do you do?
So because of authoring, How to Live Forever, that was kind of my starting point, but I'll back up to say, some of you may know I spent most of my life as a registered nurse. I still am a registered nurse. And from a point of burnout working in trauma, I've worked in every ICU that there is, and trauma, was getting burned out and went back to school in psychology because I love the biology of people, but I also love the psychology. And after that, I realized that for an ER nurse, which is what I did next, psychology was kind of like watching paint dry. Nothing happened, and that wasn't going to work for me. So I went back into nursing in the emergency department, and then about 11 years ago, I went through a very difficult divorce. Just one of the horror stories that a lot of people have seen. And it almost broke me. But with that came a determination to try to help make this better than what it is now. And so during the process, my brother, who is an educator, referred me to transformative mediation. He just sent me some information on it. And I looked into it and saw an opportunity to go to Hofstra and meet with Baruch Bush. And I did some trainings out there, and I just fell in love with mediation and the belief I still have that learning conflict skills and conflict resolution can change the world. So So I went from there into graduate school at Lipscomb University, where I got my master's in conflict management. And then the truth is, for the next year or so, I continued on a self-education route because I did not feel prepared to mediate. So I literally worked for cookies in any environment I could. I would do church mediations, conflict seminars, and people would have out a plate of cookies. So I decided I worked for cookies. And then ironically, last year I gave a talk to a large group of CPAs for continuing education. And they sent me a box of cookies in the mail to thank me for that. And I was like,
They must have heard.
a reminder that, yeah, there's a starting point that we kind of have to learn and pay our price for sure.
For sure.
You know, I'm amazed and had the pleasure of meeting with Kim and Jennifer on Monday, just in terms of having a chat and meeting each other. And Kim, I'm just amazed at the similarity in our paths, and the fact that not that I'm not an RN, haven't worked in ER, but having worked in special education and worked in public education, I sometimes felt like I was in an ER room in terms of the amount of conflict and the drama that is taking place. But the point that I really was struck by was the fact that Baruch Bush was someone that introduced you to mediation, and as you indicated, your brother sent you some materials in terms of transformative mediation, and so you took it upon yourself to go seek out Baruch Bush, which I think is just amazing. His book, The Promise of Mediation, is one that I use in a lot of the classes and coursework that I instruct in, and it's in relation to the fact that in special education we're talking about a 0 to 22 year relationship, and I think that the promise of mediation shows that it's the way to, you know, hopefully repair a relationship, transform a relationship from something it is, as he says, demonizing into something that is more positive. And I just was always struck by that whole aspect of transformative. And then to find out that you went to Lipscomb and involved with Randy Lowry, and then of course a huge fan that I'm of Ken Cloak as well. So these three individuals who I consider to be icons in mediation, they've obviously touched you as well in a big way. And I'm just curious in terms of your you've mentioned, you know, what you did in terms of going to Hofstra to seek out Baruch Bush, but I wonder if you might shed a little light on your experience there at Lipscomb with Randy Lowry, and because again, someone who has impacted my life and my mediation practice, and just wonder if you could share a little bit of that.
Yeah, so Lipscomb is the sister school to Pepperdine. So we were fortunate enough to have, I consider world-class, just world-class instructors coming out of Pepperdine. But I took my negotiation course with Randy Lowry, and I thought I was going to fail. I was sure I was going to fail because I do have a mediator heart. You know, what's on the table, let's find a good way to split it. And this is negotiation. And Randy is, if it's on the table, you own it. Like you fight for that table and leave nothing behind. And I don't know how to play like that. So he gave a scenario, and of course, my partner and I are trying to split it, which just kind of made his hair stand on end. He turned all kinds of colors. And I was sure I was going to fail the course. But I ended up getting an A in the course and realizing that I wouldn't make a very good negotiator. But he is a brilliant man, and he built an incredible source for learning about conflict here in Tennessee. That's probably our sole big system for conflict management, at least in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And he's a smart guy.
Yeah, and so to kind of follow that a little bit, We constantly we receive phone calls and emails from folks that are interested in mediation.
Mm.
You go, well, how do I get started, and where do I go with this? And so I like the milk and cookies story, or the cookie work for cookies story as well. But I'm wondering, what else are you seeing in terms of in your area, and advice that you could give people in terms of how do you start this out? Because what I see is you do need to get some formal training in some way, shape, or form, and whether it be through a DERPA or whether you're fortunate enough to be able to go to into a world-class program. But what are your thoughts there in terms of what advice would you give people, given what you know at this point?
Yeah, so I have lots of thoughts on that. Um, First of all, I think there is a world full of people out there willing to teach. And I think we have the potential to have so much impact on people's lives as they're making decisions through the most difficult things they'll ever go through, whatever kind of mediation that is, right? So I take that seriously. And I think I carry with me the medical do no harm. Like the last thing I want to do is harm. And so that is why I spent a lot of time getting a lot of, additional education. It was like my own practicum, because we did have a semester practicum, but this is a profession and we really do impact people. So I wanted to build a competence. And I will never feel like I'm there. I mean, I'm 61 now, so I don't have enough years to get the level of competence, but I like the amazement that you spoke of, Richard, which is there is so much to learn and there are so many people willing to share it. And oftentimes it's free. So the advice I would give, I spent years and still most days out of my comfort zone. I found myself doing and learning and having to do these things in order to become a good mediator. So these included things like writing and speaking and reaching out to people who, I literally was intimidated by. I mean, talking about Ken Cloak, he happened to, he and his wife, Joan, put on a program at Lipscomb, and I'm one of those nerds that sits in the front row of the classroom, which in hindsight turns out a really good place to be, because when people are speaking and you want to learn, they're willing to reach out. So it is through the education route. My board position on TAPM, the president of TAPM, here's my cat. Couldn't hold that off all day. The president of TAPM said, I noticed you at all these learning opportunities, would you be interested in this? So I didn't know where those things would take me. It wasn't for a purpose, but in life, I kind of feel like if you go for the open door, not knowing what's behind that door, you're only amazed by what the opportunities are. So it became a matter of what door can I open? And then day-to-day struggle with, I've never done this, I'm unsure of myself. And those great people that you talked about, hi Kitty, I'm trying to hold his head down. Those great people that you talk about, that it just amazes me how the best mediators in the world are so generous. Like Ken Cloak will give a talk and he'll give all of his slides and all of his time. So I ended up going out to Santa Monica and spending a week in one of his conferences too. And then William Ury did a class for 2 years called Mediate and Meditate with Thomas Hubel, who is a mystic, a world-class, does work on trauma and collective trauma. So I sat through that kind of stuff and just, I would say, the one thing I would say is don't limit yourself because of what you can't do, because if I can learn how to do it, anybody can. And know that I think there is no easy way, right? Like you just have to keep trying to open doors and walk through those doors when they open.
Yeah, I like that. And I like your comment about working outside of your comfort zone. I think that is really, really great advice. Um, in terms of the comfort zone, one of the things that you mentioned was writing, and that you weren't comfortable with that. Yet I understand you are now an author.
Well, I am, and I still write, the thoughts I have around peace or the potential or divorce, I think them, and now I try to make myself writing. I'm writing, another thing that's kind of hard work, but I wrote How to Live Forever, a guide to writing the final chapter of your life story. And
I'll try to start, but it's so hard with the screen, the background, but it's a great book, and I'm going to put it in the chat for everyone. So continue on, Kim.
Yeah, it was a calling. I have a friend who is a promoter, and as I was starting my career, she said, you need to make a brochure or something. And I have to say, in transformative mediation, at one of the classes I was in, they were like, oh, you'd make a great elder mediator with your nursing background. And I was like, really don't think I want to do that. But that door kept opening, with the medical background, the door kept opening. So I recognized the lack of empowerment, the difficulty having conversations around things that are decisions that are life and death, that leave our legacy. And just the idea, for me, the very first person I saw die as a 19-year-old RN, I sat at her bedside, and I just felt her story. I sat there wondering, I'm like, her back cover is closing. And I was wondering what people didn't know about her, what she was carrying with her. And that stayed with me the next 40 years. So I use that in all of my mediations, that we are writing our story every moment. And who do we want to be in this? How do we want to show up? How do we want to look back and see the choices that we made? So the book is around the legal, the healthcare decisions, end of life decisions, conflict, family conflict, also writing your story as your legacy. But most importantly, at least here in Tennessee, people do not know about mediation. I mean, we still Google mediation and you mean meditation comes up, so most importantly, I wanted a way for people to think of mediation as the tool that they will use when they come in conflict and struggle to make decisions.
Oh, that's excellent.
That's very good. So Kim, I read your book, and I think it's fantastic. I'm also a nurse, and so I related to a lot of what was in the book. And I think everybody should read this book, especially if you know someone who is older or facing a terminal illness. It almost can bring, I think, a peace of mind for people to gather what they need to do legally and emotionally when they're, going toward the end of life. And it's incredible that, mediation can also have a role in many of these things. And what I think it's just fantastic that you've written a book. And tell us, if you don't mind, how does this book play into your mediation practice? How have you used it as a marketing tool? Tell me how the book has benefited you in terms of building your mediation practice.
I wish I were smart enough to have like a business plan or say, well, I'll do this and then this will happen. I've always been one, like, I think all the time we're planting seeds, and I kind of wait to see what seeds grow. So when I said that was a calling, it really was. I had no idea. In my own head, maybe I self-limit, but I said, everybody's writing a book. Like I just did it because when I started writing, it just came out that way. And I'm as amazed as anybody that I wrote it on some days, because it actually is a pretty good book that makes my life go, full circle. Re-ask your question, Jennifer, because I just lost track.
How have you used if you have, how have you used the book as a marketing tool?
Yeah, it ended up giving me a credibility that I didn't expect, for writing a book. And it is a tool, especially around elder care and conflict, because there is a chapter in 2 chapters dealing with conflict that I think people kind of, if you wrote a book, you must know something. And hopefully there's some truth in that. But it did that in speaking. I mean, I I will be completely honest all the time about what it's like as a mediator speaking. You know, people tell me you need to charge, and a lot of mediators I know don't charge. Like it's a way to plant seeds. It's a way to get people interested, and it may be the long way. I'm not sure, but it's the only way I know how to do it. So I think the one thing, you know, in starting out that I would say is, you know, figure out your own why, like, why do I do this? You know, and then figure out how your why translates into the how do I do this, given the why. And Jennifer, I have to do a shout out. I think I probably told you I was going to do this, but about when COVID started, somehow I ran across Natalie Armstrong, who a lot of you probably know. After I knew her, she started the Will Work for Food, which is for those who don't know, it's a weekly presentation with internationally acclaimed people like Susan Guthrie, who speak on their area, their topic of expertise. I actually presented on the book one time, and former friends of Secretary of State. I mean, it's just a huge range of incredible people. Well, she does marketing for mediators, and she also will do a free startup call. And I watched her in a presentation. That's how I met her. And she had something like 23 ways to not start a mediation practice and 23 ways to start it. And I realized that I'd already done 23 of the ways not to do it. So I had nowhere to go but up from that point. But it was priceless, because a lot of people do how to market your mediation, and it's been vague, and I've been to those. Hers is, she thinks outside the box. It's very direct. It's very doable if you're willing to put the work in. So I hired her at 2 different seasons to help handle my social media and stuff like that. She did my connections. There's only so much time in a day between trying to speak, trying to write, trying to see clients. So just learning from her over this past, couple of years, the before and after, I know I was already planting seeds, but I can't help but think she was the fertilizer.
That's excellent. That's excellent. If there was there's advice that I'm sure you've been given that you've either heeded or not heeded, but what's the one thing that you wish you would have known that you didn't know before you started into mediation that possibly it would have made things flow a little easier?
That's a great question. And oh my gosh, you have given me a wonderful opportunity by asking that. It was the biggest disappointment after going to Lipscomb and hearing the sky is the limit as a mediator. It's a brand new field, and people are looking for solutions, that the world is your oyster. And then I finished all that and started asking around me, will you help me open this oyster? And nobody was willing. At least here in Tennessee, it was very, very closed. And I hear that from a lot of mediators. I was surprised. I was surprised and disappointed. And like I said to you, Richard, I believe, a rising tide raises all boats. So we have to be helping each other. And I think knowing, not knowing for a while how to get that help, and at the same time knowing that we should be each other's best friends, and we're not our competition. And so I think that's given me a commitment to doing whatever I can if somebody, reaches out to help, because our ultimate goal isn't clients. At least for me, that's not my why. My ultimate goal is not clients. My ultimate goal is my story and my legacy, and a commitment to wanting, hopefully, to leave the world somewhat better. I have 5 kids and 4 grandkids. Leave the world better. Because when we watch the news and see the conflict and carry the weight of what isn't working, knowing that we can help contribute, however that is, that's my why. So long answer to a short question, Richard, sorry.
Oh, no, it's great. And here again, I'm going to end up using your quote, a rising tide rises all boats. That's great. I love that. And it's really, It's very, very, very true. I look at you know, if anything that I've ever been able to give in terms of teaching or mediation is if you share it, it's um, it's like geometric progression. If you have two people involved, it's one thing. If you have three people involved, and if you just keep sharing that message, it's just like geometric progression. So a rising tide does raise all boats. I absolutely.
You know, as mediators, we're not supposed to have a scarcity mindset, right? Like,
Right.
and when if we hold it to ourselves because there's not enough to go around, we're actually practicing that, I think. I'd love to be able to give one more piece of advice. Is sorry, the one thing, this is one thing I believe we're very strongly in, and that is if you're not, get comfortable with emotion, because you know, understand it and don't learn how to control it. You won't need to, but understand where it comes from. Just be comfortable with it, because first of all, we need emotion to make decisions. Like, we know we can't, you know, people who have strokes and have their emotion centers can't decide which fork to pick up. I mean, we need emotions, and what's under the emotions is the key that unlocks what the conflict is. So I think just learning to be comfortable in them. And Jennifer, I'm happy to send you my favorite tool that my clients love it, and most mediators, but I use John Gottman's anger iceberg all the time. So we try over what happens if somebody gets angry. Then you know you're making progress, because the anger iceberg says that on top of it, we have anger. And all of us, or many of us, have learned to fear anger, to avoid anger, to shut down anger. And anger, I mean, it keeps us alive. You know, it's but William Ury says, you know, anger is the fuel to propel us, but pour gasoline on it and it becomes explosive. So we won't pour gasoline on it, but if we recognize it for the fuel. So the anger iceberg underneath is all the things that can be fueling the anger, or that lies underneath. And it's things from loneliness, disappointment. I mean, we got the hungry, tired, all that stuff too. You know, abandonment. I mean, we can't have compassion for anger. It's just hard to do, but we can have compassion for the underlying issues under anger, like fear, loneliness. And when we can identify those, to me, that's the secret that unlocks every mediation. It's not that I can come up with a solution, or maybe people can't. I believe that there is a grace. Just a grace is just the best word I have. That when people are heard and understood and validated, and there's space for them to have their emotions validated, then something magical happens, and the willingness to move forward comes in what I call grace. So we need emotions here. They're not so scary. We have to learn to control and take care of our own first, which is, you know, our lifelong project. But they have a really good role, and they should be what shows up in mediation.
Well, those are those below the line issues that oftentimes are actually what the real issue actually is in the mediation. And unless you're willing to uncover those, you're probably not going to go too far. So no, that's great advice. You know, I'm reminded of Daniel Shapiro's book, Using Emotions as We Negotiate. And I think William Ury co-authored that with him, if I'm not mistaken, but also just another great work in terms of the use of emotions in negotiation, and to not hide from them, or push them back. Oh no, we can't go there. No, we need to open all that stuff up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of being human, you know.
Yeah, and it's part of being real. And
that's true.
The entire reality check that we have to sometimes, you know, do as mediators. Sometimes that's not a real comfortable message to bring that reality check in, but you have to do so.
That's beautiful. You know, I think that's the best thing we bring to the mediation is our realness, that we get conflict. And maybe that's why I made it mediation. I've had plenty of conflict in my life. So there's very little that comes to the table that I haven't at least seen part of, in my own life. And getting that it could be me, even if it's not, kind of, there, but for the grace of God go I, in all cases, because I just believe in the interconnectedness of us as humans.
Mhm.
And while I might not be able to understand how somebody could, I know that I'm not far from the same place. If I were born someone else or raised like they were, all the things that we have in common, though maybe slightly different.
Right. No, that's right. One of the things we discussed just briefly on Monday that I'd really like to explore a little bit more about was the trust network and your work in terms of that. And I don't know if there's and I think that well, I just think there's an important message there in terms of that and the establishment of trust and in terms of working with people. And if you could share a little bit about that. And I think, as I recall, that was in some way tied with your work with Mediators Beyond Borders, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm delighted to talk about that. So after I sat in the front row at Ken's conference, and I forced adopted him, as I told you, like so many disciples of his do. Kind of stalked him. And I found out that about Mediators Beyond Borders somewhere along the line. And what an incredible group of humans. I mean, again, they offer a whole lot of tools too for people who are learning how to be mediators, and lots of opportunities for webinar and learning and stuff. So I started leaning into that. And again, I felt like these were the best leaders in the world, the best mediators in the world. And I felt like I was down here and they're up here, and I would never be able to get where they are. And the next thing you know, they're embracing you, into the world, and you're learning from them, and you're slowly walking up, never to their level, but you're getting there. And I think that's the process that is mediation. So I started leaning into the Mediators Beyond Borders, because while my practice is important, so is the mission of peace for me, and giving back. And one of so I'm involved in two initiatives directly. One is the Trust Network, and the other is the police community, trying to bridge that conflict. And so I'll just address the Trust Network, Richard, because that's what you asked me to do. Shortly before the elections, we all remember how much fun that was. Yeah. People like the Carter Center, Mediators Beyond Borders, a global tracking institute that I can't remember. So there's the greatest peacekeeping forces in the country and some in the world, recognized we were now the country that was getting sent the unbiased team to oversee our election to make sure it was fair. Like we had become that country, the ones like you hear in Venezuela and stuff. The international team was sent here. So some people got together and decided to start the Trust Network, which was done right before the election, just weeks, maybe 2 weeks before the election, with the goal of early warning, early response to mitigate or stand in the gap of potential violence, using mediators and community mediation centers to do that. The Trust Network is still continuing, though we're not meeting regularly. What we had a map of the United States that was showing, and we were reporting from the ground episodes as they came up, and trying to send a team in to do whatever their community mediation center does to discourage the violence. And there were some remarkable stories that you will never hear on the news. You would never know, like nobody knew this was happening. And oh, by the way, one of those things that they were doing at the time was press had signed to not use inflammatory language while we were waiting for the results of the election. And I knew this was happening, so I could see a difference. I don't know, go back in your news and see, they really could have sensationalized who might have thought they won and not. But there was, I think it was, I want to say over 1,000 without the numbers in front of me. A lot of people in the press committed to being as not sensational as they could manage being in the press. So people did things like hand out cookies, to these lines of people voting. I will say that, not to be political at all, but there was a demographic, a political demographic that was willing to, if one person was demonstrating, they were willing to go take their demonstration somewhere else to keep it non-confrontational. So we wanted to make space for everyone. And I'm in Tennessee. Tennessee was low on the radar of problems. But I saw in Detroit, or knew of in Detroit one time, where the police actually wore goofy outfits or something, and just did whatever they could, and it worked, to not feed into the violence, but to diffuse it.
Right.
And the Trust Network's available. I mean, if you're interested in it, you can Google the Trust Network through probably Mediators Beyond Borders. They were careful who they partnered. It was clear that there were people, there's a little vetting and a referral process, just because there are people who don't want peace. I mean, that's just true, but the educational opportunities through them still are incredible.
I was really intrigued with that, and I'm pleased to learn a little bit more about what you all did and what took place. One of the things that prompted my question was, in one of our, we conduct, I don't know, 3 or 4 what we call soirees a year. The Southern California Mediation Association does, and one of our board members, Lucia, hosts that and facilitates it and puts everything together. And we typically have some questions that we walk through. It's a lighthearted evening type of event. But one of the questions most recently was, do you use your mediation skills other than in mediation? And I think what resoundingly came out in that conversation was that most of us use not necessarily our mediation skills, but our dispute resolution skills. It's just ingrained within our lives. And I think that's what the Trust Network, and it's not so much mediation, but your dispute resolution skills and the peacemaking aspect in terms of seeking that and trying to make the world a better place. And I think that's what all of us ultimately are trying to do in terms of our mediation practices, but it expands beyond mediation to, dispute resolution in general, which I like to at least think of myself in that vein as more of a dispute resolution individual as opposed to just a mediator.
Yeah, so for me, the word mediation is a really broad word that is exactly like you described it in a second. So if mediation is limited to court-ordered, non-litigation, I don't know what the opportunities for that. It's getting better with COVID and stuff, but still, at least here, it's nowhere near our first choice of dispute resolution. It's still litigation. People want to sue. They want to make the other person pay. They want to win. I mean, they have no idea how messy that really is, right? When they first started that. So the empowerment of it too. So when I say mediation, it is around all the potential. And I hope we never make that a really small word, mediation. I will tell a funny story. Well, it's kind of funny in hindsight, but I actually, during the Trust Network, was reaching out to political people here, just for the sense of, we were putting out the word, of being careful what you did that might be inflammatory, and letting them know that the Trust Network was available if they needed help in dialogue or had a situation. And I was talking to a lobbyist who was a very far right lobbyist in Tennessee. That probably surprises no one, but and she literally said to me that as I talked about peace, she said, peace is a liberal word. And like nobody here is going to want, right? This is just fact. And I said, I get that peace has been politicized. The word peace has been politicized, but don't you want to take that word back?
Yeah.
Don't you want to own that word for it to mean an absence of violence or an interconnection that is without tension? You know, whatever peace is to you, like, isn't that such a beautiful word that we want to, like, everybody can use it and it not be a liberal word? I say that because I think mediation should be the same thing. It should be an alternative, a way of conflict resolution, you know, that we don't narrow it down to something so smallly defined that we can't all embrace it.
Right. Agreed.
Completely.
You know, I'm listening to you and I'm looking at all that you're doing. And what do you do just to let it down?
Yeah.
What was there something that because I mean, you know, all of us, you know, you're involved in conflict. We're involved in conflict every day, and trying to assist in the resolution of conflict. And you know, sometimes that conflict gets on us,
Mhm.
you will. And so what do you do to shake that? What does Kim do to kind of let it down a little bit?
That's a great question. Yeah, so on a daily basis, I have to get my 10,000 steps. Like I like am obsessed with getting my 10,000 steps. And I usually do it at night when it's quiet and I can see the sky. There's something about the night and the peace of the night. I think I don't know. I'd love y'all to weigh in on this because maybe it's just me and I'm crazy. But I think trying to walk. I know I'm obsessed about every moment mattering. I know that. Like I know even for my book, Jennifer, when you talk about older people or people with terminal illness, I know that it doesn't matter how old you are. COVID has proven that. But more than that, I had a 5-year-old niece die of a brainstem glioma. So I have this almost obsessive need to do what I can in the time I have. And part of that is balancing with, this is the part I wonder if we all struggle with, enjoying life, like enjoying the simple things in life. And that is a daily battle because I love what I do. And I think, you know, listening to my gut, if I'm not giving back in some way, that's just how I'm wired. One of my most fun things to do, and I did it yesterday, but it is to go work at our food bank in Nashville. And I'm like an assembly line worker then. I'm a factory worker. And I tell everybody that I think I was a factory worker in another life because I'm terribly happy doing that. You know? So I listen to my gut and try to answer what that need is. And it is, if I'm getting so wrapped up in, you know, learning or doing my own thing or whatever, it's like, no, it's time to step away and give back. But the physical exercise part helps keep in balance, you know, a lot too.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that, as a matter of fact. And I'm very much the same way. If I don't get physical exercise every day, I feel it. And when I do get physical exercise every day, I feel better about what I'm doing the rest of the day. It seems to pull it together. I know you weren't going to mention this, but I'm going to take you there, if you will.
Uh-oh.
And then I need to stop because Jennifer, I don't know, Jennifer, I've been kind of hogging this here now. Kim's got me, you got me going.
No. Go ahead, ask your question, and then I'm going to follow up on a totally different track. So you're in the flow.
Well, I want to ask you, and this goes along with the trust network, but the police community and the involvement that you have there. And this is where I'm just astounded at the breadth of what you're involved in. I think it's remarkable, but I'd like other people in this meeting to hear about this, because when we touched on it Monday, I was very intrigued in terms of that. Well,
yeah. So I will say this kind of loops back to the beginning, which is pretty cool. You know, in how to make it in mediation, people say pick one thing and become an expert at it and keep doing it, or find people in that. And I look at the best in the world, like Ken Cloak. I mean, he does divorce mediations, and he's doing international stuff, and he's doing conflict stuff. I mean, I tell myself, if somebody like him can be all over the board and still keep saying, maybe I can do it too. So I think for some people, picking one path, I can't imagine. I mean, maybe it would have been a lot easier. I don't know. It's just not how I'm wired. Because the thing about mediation is there's so much potential. So the police community is personal to me. I have a son who's a K-9 police officer in Cincinnati, and a son-in-law who's a Missouri State Trooper. And I have, like I said, 5 children. And on the political spectrum, they're all the way left and all the way right. And that's never been a problem until this past year. And it's because of the sense that we have to pick one thing or another, and can't do both. For the first time, my family was stressed and stretched. And there was tension that wasn't there. And that was hard. So the initiative was started through Mediators Beyond Borders to try to come up with something to help bridge those differences, which is what mediation does, right? And I mean, it can be facilitated discussions. I mean, those are skills we use in mediation. So we're still working on that, and actually now making progress. I'm excited that this could be something that we can all be a part of it. However, in our community, we want to use our skills to help make this a better world. But we are right now, we've been lucky enough to partner with Lisa Broderick of Police to Peace, and Cheryl Epps of, I don't know if she's on here, a part of your group or not, but she's a wonderful human that does mediation for the LAPD. And what they do is bring the uncomplicated nonviolent nonviolent complaints against police, and offer to mediate between, for lack of better words, and don't quote me on this, I know it's recorded, but erase this part, the victims and the offenders is how it can seem, right? So just to have a communication, a dialogue, so that there's some understanding built. We would like to expand that to something even more. So we're learning a bit of how that program works so that we can learn from it. And then some of us are going to be volunteering, myself included, honored to volunteer with LAPD as a mediator to do some of those cases in gratitude for them sharing what they know with us. Then we would like to market it. We would like to, a lot of mediators do a lot of work for free, especially with community mediation centers. And at least here in Tennessee, I don't know how it is for you all, but in Tennessee, if you're a non-attorney mediator, unless you have written a book or something, it is hard to get anything except those community mediation or the non-represented court cases, right? The things that people don't want to pay for. So a free service. I would love to be part of and see that for mediation professionalized, so that there's standards too, but there's also opportunities for income besides free mediation. I 100% believe in giving free too, but that should be an and not, for me, just the expectation. And that's a platform to do it, to be a mediator that's figuring out how to hold those discussions. Now, it's really hard. Because of course the police, they've really been demonized, right? And we show a lot, and the press shows a lot, and we talk a lot about what we see from the community side of that. But there are two sides to every story, and as mediators, it's our job to be curious and find both of those sides. And because I live with the other side too, I'm more probably keenly aware than someone who doesn't see both sides of that. Yeah, for sure.
No, thank you. That's again, it's not just about mediation for you. It's dispute resolution. It's peacemaking, and I just applaud you for everything that you're doing in terms of this. It's quite exciting.
It's very exciting. It just, it truly is what I don't know, maybe for you or for me, it's pushing a boulder uphill. This is still so unknown and still so new. And my favorite system, the medical system, is so closed down because of the legal system in some regards, right? So we have to create a space that's safe enough that people are going to trust that we don't have an ulterior motive. And I think at the bottom line, what we need to do is make it okay to be wrong. We have to make it okay to make mistakes. And the more and more we've made it not okay, the more we demonize and publicize and shame mistakes, the harder it's been to come through with, yes, that was wrong, and I'll find a new way. So in our private lives, in the social world, in the political world, we're shaming people for getting it wrong. And I say life is an experiment. Every single moment we're somewhere we've never been before. And sometimes we'll get it right, and sometimes we won't. And when we can make grace for ourselves to get it wrong, sometimes maybe we can make grace for other people too, but that is life, right? And so part of the legal system is to, you know, maybe retribution or whatever, or that's not the word I wanted, but to wrong a right. And maybe it's gone so far that we can't really do it. Instead, it's just too scary to be wrong. And I think mediation can change that.
Nice.
That's a great point, Kim.
Yeah, profound.
Yeah. I'm just in awe of you, Kim. I think that the work you have done is so amazing. You have such a great story. I mean, just to work in trauma as a nurse is a profound experience, and helping people and where you've come from it. And now, I mean, I've learned so much just sitting here of where you've been with your mediation dispute resolution practice. And it's really, it's an inspiration for me of things I would like to do in the future. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to kind of backtrack a lot now from, we've heard so many amazing things, and I always think of our viewers, and some of our viewers sometimes maybe students, dispute resolution students and such, who are so interested in this, and hearing you, it's so amazing, but it still leaves that sort of overwhelming bit, like how will I ever get there? How will I ever achieve this? And I'm so curious with just a question, it's like, how did you get your first couple of clients, or where do you get clients from, or just very, baby steps, I'll call them.
I love that, baby steps. You know, sometimes, Jennifer, you just nailed it, because sometimes I'll look at something that'll seem so big and like, who am I to do this? And then I just say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, just the next step. Thomas Hubel says, when stepping off a cliff, take a step and the ground will appear. And I hold on to that'll happen, and it has. Like, that's the crazy thing. Like, nobody's more awed by it than me. It has. Like, it's a pretty cool thing. As far as my first clients, the thing I didn't do, I was intimidated by lawyers. I don't know how many lawyers are on here, but I'm just going to say it. So I would have no more knocked on the door of an attorney and said, let me try. But I wish I would have, because I think now that I know them better, they're not so scary, most of them. But I got my first clients from friends, and yeah, I think wherever your profession was before, again, offering it free as a starter. I didn't feel right about charging somebody when I didn't exactly feel like I knew what I was doing. The Community Mediation Center is a great place to learn. I started there as well. And in our part of our Community Mediation Center does our courtroom. One of our civil courts is open to mediation. So I did that. And I still think it's important to do that kind of stuff. It not only hones your skills, but it is a way of giving back. And then it's also a way of meeting people who are in your field.
Excellent.
Just going back to basics, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's good. It's good.
I'll just remind everyone, as we're closing in on the hour here, if anybody wants to put a Q&A, a question in the Q&A for Kim, now's the time to do it. And in the meantime, I'm curious for you, is what has the transition been from someone who worked always likely for a large hospital system. And so you were able to show up and focus on your job and go home and such, to becoming a business owner. And what advice do you have, if any, for our viewers on transitioning to being a business owner, as that's what I would say 99% of mediators are also small business owners?
Yeah, so I actually got goosebumps as you were asking me that, and the smart whatever side of me wanted to say, don't do it. And I'm completely joking. I will be the first to say I'm horrible at business. I think all the nurses I know, like, we want to give away everything. Like, we're just wired that way. So don't ever ask me for business advice. But on a life thing, I think yeah, I've had to rely on friends who are good at the business side of it to help do it. I had to come to grips. I mean, I remember literally wrestling with my fee, you know,
Mhm.
and there are days so that I still think about how nice life was when I went to work for 12 hours and then I was done. Like, that was that was just wonderful in a lot of ways. So though it was hard work too. So I would say we're all capable of learning. And honestly, I will promise you, if I can do it, you can do it. Because this is that part of it, the business side of it has been so outside of my comfort zone. And just keep being true to who you are, like, trust yourself. And ask for help when you need it. You don't have to do it all, but I had to learn. I don't know how you are, Jennifer. A lot of nurses I know have a hard time asking for help. I had to learn to ask for help. And I had to do that mostly through the divorce process. So I kind of became a person who understood. It's humbling, right, to be the one to need help. But I just saw the beauty in it too, because it's a giving and receiving, which is just so much more equal. So ask for help. Phone somebody and ask them. I can't think of one time that someone I asked for help after I got past the no one wanting to help me as a new mediator here in Tennessee. But when I reached out to people, they said yes, and that just awed me. Like, I think most of us do want to help each other and lean into that. If you get a no, ask someone else. Someone will say yes.
Great advice.
Excellent. Well, Kim, I think that we are at that point where we do need to close the session, but I'd like to close it with one of your quotes from our discussion Monday, and I think that this really sums up, if you will, what you're about, and I truly applaud. And your path is, quote, a way to a more peaceful world. And I think that's just something that we all need to be working towards. And when you mentioned that on Monday, it resonated with me very strongly, just given everything we are up against right now in the world, and everything that we can do to promote a more peaceful world. And as individuals, I think we need to be doing this. And I just, it's been a pleasure to meet you. And just thank you for giving and taking your time to meet with us today.
Don't make me cry. It's been an honor. It's been an honor. I meet such great people in this job. It's just awesome.
Yeah. Jennifer, any closing thoughts from you?
No, thank you for sharing your time, Kim, and I hope one day to meet you in person. It's been great being friends on Zoom, and I'd love to meet you in person someday.
Yeah, we have to stay in touch. Y'all are awesome. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate it. You can do this.
There you go. There you go.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Kim, Jennifer, thank you very much. Those in the audience, just thank you very much for attending. I will remind you of our annual conference, November 13th. Be looking for that. You'll start seeing information going out directly, and we're looking for a big turnout and a great conference. So in any case, have a great rest of the day. And Kim, again, thank you again very much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Buddy.
Bye-bye.